wanted to do a quick recap of recent work that I did. Let me start my server. Get started, go to a browser, and we'll take a look at localhost. So you might see some styling changes. You can go to spaces, create a new space, or enter a space. We'll go ahead and create a new one. We see that we have XYZ space. We can enter it, and it has nothing in it. If you open up the menu, it has no entities. We can add a box. And here's a box. And we can add a cone. And here's a cone. And then we can reload this space. The serializer picks up the pre-existing entities that we've just made and renders them. We can change them. So we could look at the box, move it to the right by 1, and this will auto-save. So if I just refresh this page, the box should move over to the right. And it does. And I can change the scale of the cone, or let's try to rotate the cone. So I pick up the cone, rotate in the, let's try a negative 0.3 or something. Let's try that. And it should auto-save. Let's refresh this page. Okay, I guess we tilted it this way. We want to tilt in the Z direction. Cone Z. Whoops. Z. Let's do 1. 0. And refresh. Oh, okay. So that works. And let's look at the code changes. This one. So let's go ahead and look at the git log. One of the things I did was I moved the dev container, which was previously in the parent folder, and this just allows my editor to be able to run dev container when the project folder for Theaxer space is opened, instead of having to open the parent folder, Theaxer dev docker, and that allows the directories to be searched, because the problem was the git ignore of the parent that was ignoring the source folder was preventing search from working. So this most recent change just moves dev container into this project. Let's see what else. Okay, this is moving the dev container. All right, this is about the initial load, meaning when we load the page, we serialize the scene, but the serialization was actually not processing the components, meaning the rotation, the scale. So this just fixes that. So in here, in the Orchestrator find or create mesh, if a mesh is found that we know how to process, and we created a mesh, or we found the mesh for it, then for every component that is related to the entity, we'll process those components. And the types of components we can process are position, scale, and rotation, and we will set those on the mesh. Change some styling to make it generally a darker background and a lighter text. So we shifted these a bit. Still more work to be done, but there was some text that I couldn't see on the screen. These are the compiled versions of the CSS. And here I made changes to the vector3 component change set, which it lives inside here. So far the only component we have is a type of vector3, and I changed the name here. So given a type of vector3 or a change set, we will cast X, Y, and Z and also validate that X, Y, and Z are all required. Previously it was not. We made a change on get all entities to get and order the entities in the order they were created in. So new entities show up at the bottom of the list. Okay. What else? This is we added another function head for the component change set, because in the UI form we want to be able to create a form for an existing change set that we've already created. So whenever you create an entity, right now we're creating position, rotation, and scale. And because you're not receiving inputs from the form yet, you can just say change set for the component I do have, and it will correctly call the change set that takes 2 arguments. And that one will take the component and it will correctly put in a type. Whereas, actually, I'm not sure that we need to do this, right? Couldn't we give it just an empty? Yeah, I'm not sure when we need to do this. This is a good thing to take a look at. The other change set, we use atomic map to convert all the mixed map of keys and strings to pure atoms. And then what we were doing is, okay, so we're not totally using this functionality, but if you were to create a new component, you could throw in the type as a top level key and other attributes, and then type would be fished out, and they would just put in underscore type underscore underscore into the data portion. Oh yeah, you need type and data. And we also have this remove errors function I added, because if you are typing in the UI, the forms on Phoenix change function is calling this on every keystroke. And if you had an error, Ecto doesn't remove any previous errors, so you won't be able to auto-save any changes because the errors are never removed. So at the beginning of it, we remove any errors, and then if we have any cast or validation, the cast will add the errors back. What else? I commented out some unused fields right now, like child count and children. So right now we're only utilizing the parent ID on the entity. And I added into the web module file import polymorphic, so that the polymorphic form helper could be used inside views and live views. Here I'm making some changes to the space edit live index, I guess, quote unquote, controller. So we're handling the autosave anytime you add an entity. So if there's a there's a delay of 2 seconds before we autosave, except when we change focus. When we change focus, we want to just autosave immediately because the autosave looks for the change set that is in the socket. And so you're about to change that change set, so we have to save it immediately. So at the beginning of any kind of focus change, we'll call trigger autosave, which will attempt to save if there is a change set in the socket. So here we're triggering that autosave, and then we create the entity, and yeah, we set the change set to be nil, and we assign the entity. Handle event, for a select entity, we'll do a similar thing because you're selecting a different entity, so we'll autosave it. And actually, we should maybe only autosave if you're selecting a different entity, because there's a condition here, is that because you're clicking on something in the UI, it's possible to change the focus yourself. So here we only want to change the focus if you don't have a selected entity ID or the entity ID is not the one you're currently working on. And at that time, you will select a new entity and populate it into the socket. Otherwise, don't do anything. So I think this should go in there. Maybe we should do that now. Let's go, let's do that now. So let's open up, let's just browse to it. Web, live, set it live, index. So move this. Selected entity, and move this into that. So if this is the case, this or this, then we'll modify the socket. Okay. What else? Selecting component, similar thing. And yes, select component. Let's move this trigger into the need to do something case. So only if there isn't a selected component or the component that you selected isn't the one you already have, then we'll do this. Then we'll trigger. Otherwise, don't do anything. Then we have a component change. You're switching between components. Okay, when... Oh, no. Component change is when you're actually typing into the form. Here, you do want to debounce up ahead because you're still typing every keystroke. And we don't want to auto-save on every keystroke. It's going to kill the database, so we debounce. And we'll do that at the top. Here we created the change set. And we apply this action update so that we can see the correct errors in the form. And if there is a component, we just put that change set back. So this would have saved. If you get an error, it wouldn't have saved, so you just pass the change set with errors back to the front end. Then we remove this save because we're using autosave now. And then here's the autosave that we'll get as a message back to ourselves. And then we'll call trigger autosave, which attempts to save it. Likewise, if you change window focus or if you close the window, we'll trigger an autosave immediately. So debounce cancels any previous timer that it can find. And it will create a new timer and put that back into the socket. So on every keystroke, we should see debouncing. Trigger autosave. This one will also cancel that timer. We don't need it anymore because if you're switching contexts, you want to cancel that timer because you are going to invoke the save now. So if it's true that you have a component change set and you correctly update that component, then it's a success. So you get the selected entity. Oh, we have to stick the updated component back into the entity so that when we switch entity context, when we highlight the component, it's getting it from its preloaded components. So if we don't do this, we'll get a stale component back. So we stick it into the updated components, and then we assign the updated components back into the selected entity. Sorry, it looks like we only update the selected entity. We don't update the entities list, which the entities list is not loaded with components anyway. Every time we touch or select an entity, we are reloading all the components anyway. Okay. Trigger autosave. Yes, stick that back in there. If you get an error, you try to if there is an error, we might need to put the component, the change set. I don't think we have to do anything because the change set is already in the socket. So here we're already displaying the right thing. Component inputs. Yes, we made a helper that uses contact tag to help us render any number of component inputs. So as long as we get the component change set, we'll grab the data, loop through every key, and render the key. So even if we add new components, this should render the form. Let's continue. Component change, component save. Talked about this already. Okay, in the UI, yes, we added some spans around the select entity, so you're not selecting the li, you're only selecting the entity. If an entity is selected, we have the components list, and again, we're not selecting the li. We make the Phoenix click selectable only on the name part, the component type. And then here we create a new form around the component, and here we use the polymorphic embeds, and that form generation component inputs to render every component type that it has. And I think that is it. So let us try this again. See if we get some debounce messages. So if we come over here, load this page, and then I edit, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Do we get debounce messages? Here we do. All right, great. So if we look at our to-do next readme, we said once stored, we need a way to serialize it to the front end so we can load it in 3D. We did that. After an entity is created, view the entity on the screen. So we're going to need a message for that. When the entity is clicked, we can edit the components with a form. Yes, that's done. Click the position and entity and have the form update to. Persistence is done. Any connected clients get the updates too. Haven't done that, so here's a snippet of a channel broadcast that we can do. And also when we add new entities, we need to display those on the screen. Then we need to broadcast the create, update, delete changes of entities and the components. We haven't even supported that, so let's add ability to delete entity. So that can be for the next time. Anything else I wanted to talk about? I think that's it. Oh, where did the box go? Box position. Oh. There it is. Okay, so some things happen where it's like it doesn't always save it immediately. Okay, so next time we will work on sharing this information with other clients.